On July 28, 2018, Painter Train Productions took a trip to the East Broadtop Railroad for a tour of the railroad hosted by the Friends of the East Broadtop Railroad. This organization was founded in 1983 with the goal of preserving and restoring the railroad. They have and are continuing to complete various tasks and restorations on the buildings, equipment, and more of the East Broadtop Railroad. On this day, the public had a special opportunity to tour the buildings on site at Rock Hill Furnace. The first clips we will show are of the engines that sit somber and quiet in the Roundhouse. The East Broadtop Railroad's first Mikado was number 12, which was built in December of 1911. Number 12, nicknamed Millie, led the path to 5 more Mikados to be purchased by the railroad. Millie was one of 2 engines to operate in 1960 when the East Broadtop Railroad came back to life through tourist operations. In the year 2000, number 12 breathed life one more time in her firebox and has not run since due to firebox issues. The second Mikado built for the East Broadtop Railroad was number 14, which was built in October of 1912. Number 14 served in both regular and tourist operations and has been said to be in quite excellent condition. She went out of service in 2005 with really no serious issues for a 15-year rebuild. It has been discussed in each tour I have heard about number 14 being the locomotive to be brought back to life once the railroad returns to tourist operations, but only time would tell. Number 15 is very similar to number 14 and was built in February of 1914. Number 15 is arguably the most famous engine at the East Broadtop Railroad, as it served in regular operations and was the last locomotive running during tourist operations. Her fire dropped for the last time in December of 2011, but she is still certified to run until the year 2020. The first of the biggest Mikados was number 16, which was built in June of 1916. This locomotive served very well for hauling coal in regular operations, but never saw life again after the railroad closed regular operations in 1956. The second biggest Mikado was number 17, which was built in March of 1918. This engine served for regular operations and was returned to service for tourist operations. This engine did not see much time pulling tourist trains, but operating freight at fall spectaculars. Number 17 last operated in 2001 and was taken out of service due to its flues and running gear. The last Mikado, steam locomotive, and the heaviest and biggest locomotive for the railroad was number 18, which was built in August of 1920. This engine, like number 16, worked during regular operations, but has not seen life since 1956. Number 18 weighs in at 164,200 pounds, compared to number 12, which is 112,000 pounds. There is also one motor car in the Roundhouse, the M1, which was built in January of 1927. This motor car is a fan favorite of many and is still operational, but does not see the light of day much. With a small slice of the history of the railroad, we now move on to the preservation of the railroad. The Friends of the East Broadtop Railroad have been little by little preserving and bringing the railroad back to life. Their main projects include the restoration of Combine number 14, a steel boxcar, and many of the buildings at Rock Hill Furnace. While I was visiting the railroad on July 28th, the railroad was in the middle of stabilizing the freight office. This is just one example of the buildings that they are working on to stabilize and fully restore. You can help the Friends of the East Broadtop by becoming a member, donating, volunteering at a work session, and much more. The railroad will be back one day, and this amazing narrow gauge railroad will see life.